Hey, this is Jim Norris. Welcome to the radio webinar. I'm the publisher of Entertainment Spotlight and the president of Entertainment Marketer. So, one of the most important factors in an artist's career is getting their songs on the radio. So, that's what we're talking about today. The chat is open. If you have questions, just look for the question mark at the bottom of your screen. That's the Q&A section. And you can put the questions in there and we'll deal with all of them at the end of the session. This session is being recorded, so afterwards you will get an email that'll indicate where the file is, and so you can have a look at it again. One important factor with all learning, whether it's a webinar, an in-person seminar, online learning, magazines, books, it doesn't matter what it is that you have a follow-up plan. A lot of times people get a lot of knowledge, put it in their head, but the next day everything's business as usual. So it's important to make a list of 3 or 4 things that you're going to be doing differently in the future, a to-do list. Do that tomorrow morning when it's fresh, and make sure that what you hear and what you experience with Alan Cross changes your life. We're really lucky today to have Alan Cross with us. He's one of the foremost experts on broadcasting in North America, long history as a broadcaster and music expert. So you'll definitely benefit from all of his experience. He also tells it like it is. So what we're going to start with is a couple of fallacies, I guess. And number one is that radio is no longer relevant, so it doesn't really matter. And secondly, is that even if it does matter, it's impossible to get your songs on the radio anyway. So I'm going to introduce Alan Cross, and he'll talk about that and many other things.
Radio is still very powerful, very popular, very profitable. More than 80% of the Canadian population listens to radio every single week. So it is, contrary to what naysayers will say, it is not dead. It hasn't gone away. The car is still a very, very, very important place for radio. And we've actually seen a rise in the number of people listening to radio at home, reversing a decline over the last number of years. So we're here, we're healthy, it's fine. Now, getting your song on the radio is extremely difficult because you are competing with the rest of the world. Now, if you're Canadian, you have a bit of an advantage because radio stations do have to play 35% Canadian content, but you got to be not just good, you got to be great. And this is the first thing that I would suggest. Just because you make music doesn't mean you deserve to be heard. I'm sorry to be really brutal about that, but that's the way it is. You have to be able to compete with the best in the country, if not the best in the world. Now, that is if you want to get on a radio station's playlist and get regular rotation. That's one thing. Now, getting featured, and feature is a term that we use for one or two or maybe three plays of a new song. Now, that usually comes in the form of a specialty program. Many radio stations still do new release programs once a week, or programs that are devoted to indie music once a week. It's just good business. You just got to figure out which radio stations still do those shows. Now, if you're an emerging musician trying to get your song on the radio for the first time, those are the things that you should attack: the feature shows and the indie shows. If you want to attempt to get into regular rotation, that's another thing entirely.
So what's well, I guess the first thing is at a station such as The Edge, how many songs a week would you receive through all the different sources, I guess?
Well, I can't speak for them because I'm not working in the music department, but I get up to 600 a week.
Right. And of those, how many would actually get added in any way?
It's really hard to say because a lot of them are cold calls from publicists. They
Okay.
just send an email. What they charge you to send an email to everybody on their mailing list, and they hope that someone somewhere will take an interest. Now, in my particular case, I'm just doing a website right now, and the number of those submissions that get selected each week for a one-time feature on the website is about 12, maybe 15 on a good week. That's it. So again, the barrier to entry, and I know this is going to sound really discouraging, but the barrier to entry uh, for making music these days is really, really low. I mean, you can do it on a laptop in your bedroom, and you can get this music out to everywhere in the world with a TuneCore purchase. Get it on every single music streaming platform around the planet. The problem is that this every single day 100,000 other songs, and that's the number. It's about 103,000 other songs get uploaded at the same time every single day. Now, that's being exacerbated by AI because you've got these knobs out there that are creating AI songs and they're uploading those too. And that's probably on top of the 103,000. And it's just slop. It's just garbage. A lot of it is just people goofing around, and then the other bunch are songs that don't have any real musicians behind it. So it's that's a problem that we can talk about later. So the the mission is formidable, but again, it is not insurmountable.
That's great. So so what is the nowadays, what's the process for, um, if you were to make a to-do list after this on getting your songs on Canadian radio, what is the process? What do you do first, and how are they submitted generally nowadays?
All right, measure your expectations and make sure you know that just because you make music doesn't mean you deserve to be heard on the radio. That's number one.
Right.
Number two, you need to do a lot of stuff before you submit this song. Are you playing live? Do you have a fan base? What's your social media following? Are you do you have people that are willing to evangelize for you? These are things that need to be, radio stations and record labels for that matter want to have a turnkey operation. They want to look at something and go, okay, this act knows what they're doing. They have a fan base because they've obviously worked at it, shown dedication to their art, and have been successful convincing other people that their music is good. Great. Well, that's a start because radio today is unlikely to just grab somebody out of the blue and put them on. You have to have a backstory. You have to have some built-in support before anybody takes a look. So that's number one. Number two, when you have all this stuff together, what you need to be able to, you have to put together some kind of press kit, outlining all your social numbers, outlining how many gigs you've played, outlining who you've toured with, opened with, or collaborated with, all that sort of stuff. You need to build a resume that shows something impressive, or at least something that will get somebody's attention. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to do before you even think of submitting a song to a radio station.
And then physically, how are the songs submitted nowadays once you get to that point using the various services? Does anybody send CDs anymore, or is it all done electronically?
We, no CDs, please, and no MP3s either. MP3s tend to gum up email inboxes. So don't. I mean, the last thing I need to do is come down in the morning and find my email full of 10 megabyte song files. They're just too difficult to deal with, and frankly, I got too much many other things to do. So a link, please send a link. I don't care. It could be a SoundCloud link, could be a Spotify link, or anything that it doesn't involve a file. Another thing that would be helpful is, have you made some kind of effort to be discovered on YouTube? That is one of the world's biggest discovery sites, because if somebody hears about you, the chances of them going to YouTube to find out more or to listen to you is going to be YouTube. That's where people are going to go. If you don't exist on YouTube, for many people, you don't exist. That's the truth. So uh, now you don't necessarily need a video. A static image with audio will be just fine. A lyric video or a visualizer would be good too. Again, you got to have a certain level of game before somebody is going to take you seriously, because again, you're competing with the best in the world, and in some cases you're going to be competing with major label acts that have lots of promotion and marketing dollars behind it. You got That's just the way it is. So how can you level up to that so that you can compete with the big boys, really? So there's my then the other thing that you can do, and it costs money. I mean, everything costs money, is find yourself a reputable music plugger, not just necessarily a publicist who will send out a bio and a press release. That's fine. I get 600 of those every single week. Find a proper plugger who has good relationships within the music industry. And Canada has a whole bunch of them. I mean, there's Canvas Music, there's Hype Music, there's a bunch of people who know program directors and music directors and other musical influencers across the country. And they, when an email from one of these people pops into my inbox and I see a list of acts that they're they're promoting or they're trying to market, I automatically go, oh, okay. These songs have already been filtered at least once by somebody I trust, or somebody whose who understands the radio business and understands the music business. So who you find to get your music in front of the right people, who you employ to do that, is also a very big deal. Again, Canvas Music, I look at what David Tysowski sends me, and it's like, okay, there's got to be something on this list. And most of the time there is. So that's important. And then Dave is another guy, or a lot of these people, who can actually get somebody in the radio business to respond to their email or to pick up the phone. That's what you're paying for. Because again, these are trusted people. And that is the next step into being seen. Forget about being heard just yet. That's the thing that's the next step to being seen. And once you're seen and your representative can make a case on your behalf, well, then you've just crossed another threshold.
Excellent. So explain about Canadian content. So a lot of people misunderstand what it is and how it all works. If you could just talk about that for a minute.
Sure. By law, since 1971, Canadian radio stations have to devote a certain percentage of their playlist to songs of Canadian origin. And there is something called the Maple system that we determine the Canadianness of a particular song. It's terribly flawed, but it's the one that we have to go on. And it's the MAPL system. And as long as you're a Canadian citizen and you're writing your own music, no problem. Don't worry about having to fulfill the Maple criteria, unless, of course, you do a cover by a foreign act. And then at that point, it starts to get kind of weird, because you didn't write the music, you didn't write the lyrics, but you are the artist. And please don't talk to me about what the P means, because it's just so stupid and flawed that it doesn't even really figure into our discussion here. So that's what Canadian content is. Now, radio stations currently, the minimum that we have to dedicate to Canadian music is 35%. There are some radio stations that were so keen on getting a license that they promised 40%. In Toronto, for example, we have the edge, 35%, but Indy has a commitment of 40%. So that's a 5% advantage in our particular discussion. They need more Canadian music to fill their quotas. And they can do one of two things. They can play more Canadian music, or they can play the same songs more often. Again, it's all about the math. There is another way that things are organized in Canada, in that Canadian content plays. The time of day when this 35% counts is between 6 a.m. and midnight, Monday to Friday, and also 6 a.m. to midnight, Sunday to Saturday. Now, that sounds confusing, but what it does is it forces programmers to spread out their Canadian content throughout the day. So by having a 35% CanCon rule between 6 a.m. and midnight, Monday to Friday, that means you can't dump all your Canadian music after 10 p.m. It has to be spread out throughout the day. And you can't dump it all on the weekend because it has to be spread evenly throughout the week. So, and nothing counts between midnight and 6 a.m. That has never been counted with CanCon. So it's a complicated thing, and for a lot of music directors, they become accountants. They become math wizards. They have to figure out how to maximize uh, the amount of music that they play, the type of music that they play, within the parameters set out by those three things: the percentage and the times of day when those songs must be played.
Wow, lots to consider. So, can you talk briefly about the different types of radio stations, campus, commercial, all the different types that are there, and obviously some of those are a little easier to get airplay.
Yeah, a lot of campus radio stations and community radio stations are very, very amenable to playing new music, different kinds of music, and it doesn't have to be of a particular genre. It could be jazz, could be world music, could be pop, dance, rock, punk, whatever. Simply because they are not beholden to ratings, and therefore they don't have to worry about advertising. Advertising is how radio stations make money, and the higher the ratings they have, the more they can charge for their commercials. And one of the things, and I'm sorry to say this, but one of the things that has been true since the beginning of radio is that people want to hear hits. Audiences want to hear hits. And playing an unfamiliar song, or a song that is even somewhat substandard compared to all the songs programmed around it, is death. People tune out and go to another radio station. So commercial radio stations have to be very careful with what they play and when. Now, campus stations, community stations, and even to a certain extent, the CBC doesn't have to worry about any of these things. Certainly, they don't have to worry about it on Sirius XM on channels like The Verge. That's another opportunity, because I think The Verge is 100% Canadian content, and they're always looking for stuff. Um, and the CBC has CBC Radio 3, which again, I think is 100% Canadian content. So those are places that you want to go. Now, when it comes to campus stations, chances are they've got a zillion hosts for programs throughout the week. And many of these hosts will be specialists in certain genres. So you got to find the punk shows. You got to find the jazz shows. You got to find, whatever these stations play and at what time of day. Um, this is where, for example, a radio plugger can really, really help. They can target such shows with the material that they've been given. They have a great database. They know the hosts, they know the programming directors, they know the music directors, and they can focus on them. Which is something you don't get with a straight publicist who just sends me another email, and it gets lost in that 600 that I get in. So there's that. These radio pluggers can also know what's going on with commercial radio stations. Do they have feature slots? Do they have feature programs? Do they have new music programs that sometimes feature unfamiliar artists, or what we call emerging artists? Do they have an indie show? And there's a couple of ways, and if they do, that's fantastic. So what you need to do there is, let's say, I can only speak for my particular experience. Back when I was programming the Edge, we had Dave Bookman, and Dave Bookman was a well-regarded, highly regarded indie music supporter who had the Indie Hour, which either ran on Sunday night sometimes or ran on Thursday nights sometimes, whatever the case. And people would know to submit stuff directly to Dave. And if he liked your stuff, and again, this is his job to pass judgment. If he liked your stuff, then there was a chance you got to play it. You got to hear your song on the radio, and that is something that you can then put into your press kit. You know, I've received airplay from personality X on radio station Y. It's like, oh, okay, so you've already made it on the radio, albeit as a feature or part of a program like at the Indie Hour, but it's still a big deal in terms of your resume. Um, Another thing that you can do, and this is getting harder, but it's still possible, is that let's say you have a radio station that you really, really like, or a bunch of radio stations that you really, really like. Um, and on these stations, you have a favorite personality, a favorite DJ. Target them, create a relationship with them one on one through email or however you want to do it. And you can do it in any sort of creative way that you want. I mean, um, I've seen announcers get packages loaded with wrapped in thongs, for example, just to gain some kind of attention. It's a physical product. And it's like, oh, okay, well then, and inside is either a CD or a press kit with a link to Spotify or SoundCloud or whatever it is. I remember the first time I ever heard from Colorado, I got a Ziploc bag. Inside was the CD and it was covered in glitter. The bag was full of glitter. And I was like, what's this? Okay, well, that's interesting. And it got my attention. And, look what happened with Colorado. Another example would have been City and Color. Also, Bedouin Sound Clash. When Barry Taylor worked at the Edge, they developed relationships with Barry Taylor. And Barry was one of the guys who sat in on the weekly music meeting. And Barry came in with both City and Color and Bedouin Sound Clash records. And he believed in the bands and pushed them, pushed them, pushed them, pushed them, pushed them until we got, okay, you're right. You win. We'll add them. USS was another band that Barry found and brought into the music meetings and championed them until he was blue in the face. And okay, fine. And that case was like a 6-track EP, independent EP that they'd put out. So there were, what you have to do is find ways to burrow in to get inside the onion. And again, how you do that when it comes to targeting individual DJs, that's up to you.
So, if you could explain a little bit about performing rights, because it's obviously one of the sources of revenue for songwriters, and radio is a big part of that. That if you do have a hit on radio, the SOCAN checks can get pretty big. So if you can just explain a little bit how that works, how it's tracked, and the importance of it for an artist slash songwriter.
Right. If you're a songwriter and you're serious about it, you must register to be a member of SOCAN. SOCAN is a performing rights organization. Their job is to track where your song gets played and to collect money for those plays. And that's not just radio, that's television. And that's even something like being played in, it's Spotify and all the streaming music services. It's television. It's a radio being played in an office. It is music being played over some sort of PA system. It's music that you hear at a hockey game, for example. That arena has to have SOCAN license, and they have to pay so much money per year for the privilege of playing music to crowds. Every bar, every restaurant, every hair salon, every venue that you can think of, even a garage where a radio is playing in the service bay, Well, that's public performance, and that means that that garage has to pay a SOCAN fee, an annual SOCAN fee, and that their case is probably like $250 a year. That's doesn't matter. And SOCAN sends people out to make sure that people have their licenses in their places of business, and if they don't, well, then that creates a very big problem for the business. Um, and how much they pay is dependent on the nature of the business, the nature of the venue, how big it is, and that sort of thing. So SOCAN does extremely important work, and they pay out a lot of money that artists would otherwise, they would be heard, but they wouldn't be paid for it. Then there's another thing called neighboring rights, which means radio stations pay this. It's we pay SOCAN fees in the radio stations, which is a percentage of pre-tax revenue. So the more revenue we bring in, the more we have to pay to SOCAN. Same thing with neighboring rights. Neighboring rights is something that the United States doesn't have. In the US, when your song is played on the radio, only the composer gets those performance fees. In Canada, we have the composer of the song get paid through SOCAN, but through neighboring rights, everybody else who participated in the creation of that song also gets a piece of the action. And we pay pre-tax fees to the neighboring rights organization. Then there's something called the Canadian Music Reproduction Rights Association, CRRMA. And this is an interesting one that first came in about 25 years ago, where it used to be that a radio station would get a CD or a record, and that's what we would play on the radio. But with the advent of digital distribution, the CMRRA successfully petitioned for and got a fee, another, again, pre-tax fee based on revenues from advertising, for the privilege of a radio station making a digital copy of a song. So, for example, a CD comes into the building, and we wouldn't play that CD on the air anymore. Instead, what we would do is we would make a digital copy of it, copy that to a hard drive playback system, and play that on the air. Well, we've just made a copy. And for the privilege of making a copy, we have to pay. And not only is there the single copy for whatever gets played on the air, well, whatever we play on the air in that hard drive playback system is going to be backed up multiple times to a tape drive system, a server, something along those lines. And that constitutes a copy as well. So there are three fees that radio stations and others have to pay. And you need to be registered at least with SOCAN and at least with, NRCC? That's what it is. And the Canadian Music Reproduction Rights Association. Otherwise, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And for whatever you do, and this is not talked about enough, is that when you submit a song and you put a song out there, and I don't care how you put it out there, it's just a digital version of your song, make sure the metadata within the file is complete and correct. Because if your metadata isn't complete and correct, then you risk having your song misattributed to somebody else. So fill out all those fields and do it correctly. Otherwise, you are cheating yourself out of money. I think CMRRA they've got this big black box of songs that they can't determine ownership of. They can't, because they ever submitted the songs did not fill out all the metadata fields, and as a result, they're not really sure who this money belongs to. So there's this box of money that they're constantly trying to pay out, but they can't in many cases because they don't know who it should go to.
Amazing. What are the other thing I just wanted to mention is, of course, if you start to get significant radio airplay, the amount you play live and the amount that you can charge goes up substantially.
Yeah.
I remember being with Gary Peterson of the Guess Who when These Eyes Broke, and they went from $500 a night to $20,000 a night in about a month. They were just freaking out. Like, they'd been around a long time, but with that was such a huge hit. And of course they went on from there, and then things like selling merch and any other revenue that you generate, radio airplay makes big difference in all of that for sure. So
It
it's
really does. It's huge. So, um, you know, get that radio airplay, get those radio airplay royalties, or in fact, get royalties from wherever you can. That's SOCAN's job. And it's mailbox money after that. You just go to the mailbox every 6 months, or well, in this case, get an e-transfer every 6 months or whatever it is. Money that your song, that your music has earned. It's yours. You deserve it.
for sure. So what are the biggest mistakes you've seen? You don't have to name anybody, but some of the biggest mistakes you've seen musicians make when they're pitching their songs to radio, and I guess, and how to avoid them as well.
Well, the worst thing I ever saw was somebody who came up to me at a music conference with a CDR in a bag, in a baggie, and on the disc was written "some shit I've done," and that was it. That was all. I
Wow.
mean, so it's like, okay, I can see how much you care about your music. You didn't even bother to give me a track listing, a title, anything. So guess what went immediately into the trash? You have to understand that radio programmers, any programmers, as a matter of fact, are completely overwhelmed by stuff every day from people that are just like you, but maybe aren't smart enough to care about the presentation, to care about the package, to care about the way you um, offer this music to people that matter. If you don't care, they won't either. That's the big one. And the other thing is things, sending something in and then expecting, a call one day. Oh, we love your stuff. I mean, that may have happened in 1963, but it does not happen today.
And what about relationship building? You sort of alluded to that slightly, but I think it's important that maybe it's your first record, but the thinking should be building a relationship with everybody, the fans, the radio, the industry, for the next 10 years, because that's possibly how long it's going to take to have some level of success.
100%. I mean, networking is the most important thing that you can do next to actually making the music itself. Go to gigs, hand it out to other musicians. Man, if you can get another musician to testify and evangelize on your behalf to other musicians, that's a powerful tool. If you can get it to, a music supervisor, if you can get it to a DJ at a club, if you can get it to, anybody who is in some level an influencer, get it to them. And speaking of influencers, and we go back to social media now, one of the things that I recommend a lot of people do is, and it's a long shot sometimes, but cut up songs into 30-second bits and make them available on your website or through your social media for TikTok. TikTok pays out. And if you find somebody that decides that they want to use your song as a background to one of their videos and that video catches fire, well, ask Mother what it was like when all of a sudden a 2008 song that everybody had pretty much forgotten about ended up becoming one of the biggest TikTok songs of the year a few years back.
That's amazing. So I think I'm going to have a look at the questions here just for a second, see what people are asking. Okay. Da, 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 da. One question is, do radio programmers use any AI tech as a tool to try and predict a potential hit? That's a pretty good question.
It is a good question, but at the radio station level, no. At the record label level, yes, they've been doing something like that for a
Okay.
very long time. There was a company called Hit Song Science. They came out of Spain, maybe 25 years ago. And what they did was they fed it all these data points, all these songs that were on the Billboard charts from 1955 forward. And based on that, they were able to give an analysis of whether this song, based on past success of these other songs, would be successful. Um, but one of the interesting things is that they fed it a whole bunch of U2 songs, and all the U2 songs came back as, nope, these are going to be a flop. So it was highly inaccurate, but it did weed out some stuff. But see, this is the interesting thing about creativity, about something different. The public doesn't necessarily know what they want until you give it to them, and you can try to, something's going to come out of left field that you can't, um, predict. So no, we don't use it, at least not yet, and I hope we never use it.
Okay. Um, do programmers take into account whether the artist is signed with a label or not?
Sometimes it does help because it again shows that you've got some reputation, that somebody believed in you.
And yeah, you mentioned music pluggers. What should people look for when they're looking for a music plugger? What kind of background and qualifications would everyone want?
Thing that you should network with other musicians about. Have you had success with this person? Have you heard about them? Have you had any results as a result? How much do they charge? That is something that you can network with and ask around about.
Okay, what else we got here? It says, does neighboring rights apply to college and community radio in Canada?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Applies to everything.
Okay. I have an artist that has some local airplay on 3 stations, and they're asking how do they get to the next level? So they've had some success,
Great.
local basis. What did they do next?
Tell everybody about it.
Okay.
That's right. I mean, again, that becomes part of your resume, your calling card. Hey, I got some success locally. I mean, this is how things used to break out in the old days before everybody consulted the same charts. You would have a regional hit, or local hit, then a regional hit, then a national hit, then an international hit.
I've do the programmers, radio folks ever seek out an artist? Does that ever happen where they hear the music and they'll find the artist? And I guess
Yeah,
my question too is, do radio people go out and see bands live anymore? I mean, that used to be really common.
the good ones do. Yes, it's very important for them to. You got to be, what's happening on the street. I'll give you an example. Is that when I was working at Indie 88 for a few years, we heard about and sought out July Talk because there was so much buzz in the street. People had seen them a bunch of times, and it was obvious that something's going on with this band. So sought them out, and then the next thing was, they started playing station showcases, and from there it just kind of blew up.
Yeah, they did extremely well. Um, well, during the pandemic, I think they were the band that was doing. Can't remember. They did some shows in some weird venues or something. I can't remember what it was exactly.
Well, yeah, that's sort of the gorilla thing. Again, here's another example of a band that really wanted it. Again, that's what you got to show. Arkells. I mean, they would play the opening of an envelope. They were everywhere, and they were absolutely. They just never got tired of promoting themselves, and they did it in a really fan inclusive way. Look what happened to them.
That's for sure. One question here, I think it's easy answer, but can you be a member of both SOCAN and CMRRA
You should be.
since they do different things? I think the other thing to talk about just a little bit is um, if you are a member of SOCAN, what happens to your music internationally? How does that work?
SOCAN works with performing arts organizations around the world, and they will work with those organizations to collect foreign plays on your behalf.
Right. Another thing I know a lot of artists aren't aware of is the fact that if you're playing your songs live, that you can get paid. There's a form that I find almost no artists know about this, and there's a form on the SOCAN website where you can go in and put in a particular gig you've done, let's say, and the songs you played, and then that can turn in. If you're playing original songs live, that can turn into some revenue. It's not going to make you rich, but why not?
Every penny counts. So, yes, get to know your SOCAN membership very, very well. And don't just assume that they'll take care of everything. You be a little bit more proactive, make a little more money.
Yeah, the people at SOCAN are great as well. They have artist reps that'll be glad to sit down with you and help you with your career, and they do some grants to songwriters and advances and all kinds of things. So it's something to know about for
Right.
sure.
And you don't pay them up front. They take a percentage of what they collect. So
Right,
there's no upfront payment to SOCAN or NRCC or CMORA. They
right,
just they take a commission is basically what they do.
exactly. Um, Multiple streams of income, which we're talking about, is a very important um, principle in business, I guess, and especially online. And during the pandemic, a lot of musicians learned the opposite lesson, that they only had one source of income, and that was playing live. And hopefully, since that time, some of them have learned the lesson that, as many sources you have, the better. Because if something disappears, like live music disappeared for a year and a half, um, then you're working at Dairy Queen or something else. So it's important to maximize all of these areas, because you can actually earn a living if you're smart about it. If you've got good music,
Yeah, and if again, what kind of publishing deal do you have? If you have a good publishing deal, their job, the publisher's job, is to exploit your music as much as possible because it's usually a 50-50 deal. You get 50% of the revenues, they get 50% of the revenues. So you are in charge of coming up with new music and promoting that new music by playing live and recording it. And then their job is to make sure that every time that they collect their 50%, and the more they push your song, the more the publisher pushes your song for things like sync and TV and radio and movies and whatever else. Yeah, sync would be TV commercials, movie trailers, movies, TV shows, that kind of thing. And getting people to cover your songs, people to sample your songs, interpolate your songs. Um, that's in their best interests because all that stuff equals money.
for sure. I interviewed Mark Jordan the other day, and he's an artist that has a long history of as a songwriter. And when he went to Los Angeles and signed, um, if you look Mark Jordan up and you see the artists that he's written songs for, it's unbelievable.
Mm,
It's great that he's made a great living as a songwriter, more than an artist even. And of course, his songs have got not only his own songs, but the ones he's written for other artists have gotten massive amounts of radio airplay.
yeah, mailbox money just keeps coming in. The song's out there. It's a hit. It gets played over and over and over again, and
Yeah,
you watch the money roll in.
that's the good part. Is like you said, when those checks come in the mail or you get the deposit in your bank account, that's a good thing for sure.
Which brings me back to the idea of networking, collaborating with other artists. Maybe somebody that's a little bit better known than you. Maybe you
Right.
co-song with them, and that song becomes a hit based on um, their notoriety. Well, guess what happened to you? You get money.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And where you see that is at the SOCAN Awards when you go there. and they talk about the different songs, and they give you the list of the songwriters and publishing companies. It's probably half of them are collaborations, I would say, from the times I've gone. They're
Yeah.
not single songwriter. There's a lot of them involved.
Right. Now, if you look, Mike McCarty once told me, he used to work at SoundCAD. He once told me that one year, 2024, the top 10, the top 10 earners on SoCAD were all songwriters, and none of them had ever played a gig. They wrote
Right.
the material for other people, or wrote parts of the material, a beat, a top line, something for somebody else. And they never played live, yet they were the top 10 earners of all artists for SoCAD.
Yeah, well, it's a good gig being a songwriter, that's for sure. You don't have to worry about much equipment. You don't have to worry about traveling or a lot of things. You can be by yourself, and hopefully, if you write the right songs, you can make some money. So, Alan, we'll wind it up soon. Anything else you want to add to this, or
That's
sort
a
of
lot of data. I mean, to go back,
the people what they should do next?
go back and listen to this again. Take all the notes that you can, because there's and this is just a start. But that's everybody starts somewhere, and that's what I suggest you do. The other thing I will say is that, again, it's not enough to be good. You have to be great, and the only way that you get great is by writing, performing, writing, performing until you cannot write or perform anymore. And finally, don't think for a second that just because you write a song means you deserve to be heard. You got to fight for your stuff. If you believe in what you do, it's got to be for the long haul. It can't be for the money. It can't be for the fame. You need to live, breathe, sleep, eat music. And those are the people that will get ahead most of the time, some of the time. But if you're just doing this as a hobby and you're not giving it your all, then you're going to lose out to people who are giving it their all.
For sure. Well, thank you very much, Alan, for your time. And I'd like to thank everybody that attended. In the follow-up email, I'll make sure Alan's website is there. And another thing that Alan does in his spare time is he travels around doing speaking engagements. You'll see those listed. You'll see it on social media as well. So that's another way you can follow up on this, is if he's in your neighborhood, go out and you can actually listen to him and meet him in person, and get some networking going in that area.
Yeah. Do you know how many people show up at those gigs with CDs and albums?
I can imagine.
Yeah.
All righty. Thanks a lot.
You
Take
bet.
care.
Good luck to everybody.
Take care.